So it's a pleasure for me for our local author series today to have Tarah Schwartz. Tarah, welcome.
Thank you, Mike. So happy to be here.
Well, it's great. When I started this local author series, I didn't really think of Tarah Schwartz as an author. Started this at the beginning of the year, yet here you are. I Can't Help Falling, Your Journey to Motherhood. I've got it right here. It's a fantastic book. I have to say that usually I'm a slow reader, and I binged read it. I read it like overnight, and it's all about, like I said, you're becoming you're a first-time author, and about becoming a mom. What was it like becoming a first-time author? Not a quick journey, is it?
Well, no, it's funny that you say that, Mike. You wouldn't have thought of me as an author, and I don't think I would have thought of me as an author. You know, I was a broadcast journalist for 20 years, and we tend to write things in, short 2-minute segments. We just don't write longer pieces. We're not newspaper reporters. So it was a really interesting exercise for me to write a book because I didn't even know if I had it inside of me.
Now to skip right to the end, but not to ruin the story.
What? Don't skip right to the end.
Well, I'm not going to ruin the story because people know the ending. It's a happy ending.
Right.
But we'll get to the beginning of the story shortly. But you have a beautiful 10-year-old son named Sam. You have a loyal husband named Enrico, and you have a cat, and I love cats, cote-saint-luc. I have the cote-saint-luc Cats Committee, Milo. So this
Milo,
is a story.
we pronounce it Milo.
Milo, okay. So
Yeah.
People should know when they read the book. There's a happy ending to all of this, even though it's very hard to read at some points.
Yeah, no, and I'm always quick to say that not everybody who goes through the struggles that I went through has either a happy ending or the same kind of happy ending. I think everyone who struggles with infertility struggles with becoming a parent. You have to find your own road there. And sometimes your road is just accepting that it's not right for you, or you don't feel like going through it, or it's too difficult, and that you just want to focus on your couple. And that is a perfectly happy ending as well. So it really just depends what becomes happy for you. But my happy ending, fortunately ended up including a beautiful baby boy.
So Tarah, when did you decide to actually write a book and publish it?
So I didn't think of publishing a book when I started writing it. I started writing it when I got back from South Korea with my beautiful baby. And I just had so many things inside of me. I had heartbreak, I had sadness, I had joy, I had love, I had so many emotions, and I kind of needed a place to put them. And I love words, and I've always loved writing. So for me, it was just like, you know what? I'm just going to write about this experience that we had from the very beginning. And at first I thought it was a bit of a love letter to my little boy, that one day he'd be able to read it and learn how much he was wanted. Another part of me thought, there's so many women going through this, and I didn't know about a lot of books or articles that I could have read to see myself reflected. So I thought, well, maybe I'm going to put my story down there. I wanted to write to have a place to put everything I was feeling. So it kind of just, I started writing, and I kept writing, and I kept writing, and I kept writing. And then I realized that I had an ending, which is something I hadn't had for so many years going through what I was living. And finally I had an ending. So it sort of became, in about a year and a half, sort of a raw manuscript.
So in the book, Tarah, you really make it very clear to the reader who may not be familiar with these things, the pain that a woman goes through when she miscarries, and the worry that she's going to miscarry again, the difficulty and the challenge for in vitro, and then the challenge that adoption is not so easy. Can you touch on those three subjects?
Yeah, I think it is so important for so many reasons for people to understand that when someone is going through infertility issues, when someone is having miscarriages, it is absolutely heartbreaking. There's no other way to describe what it is to live it. It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to want a baby and not be able to have one. And I think that while people see their friends and their family going through it, and they think, oh, that's too bad, you had a miscarriage, I don't think they realize the depth of the pain. And I don't think they realize how long it takes to pass over. So part of writing the book was to help people understand that. And, so many people have reached out to me after writing this book, and someone who had read it, who had never had miscarriages, but who had friends who had gone through it, she said, I wish that I had read this 6 years ago, because I would have said more and I would have done more. So I think this awareness around understanding how hard it is, it will open up a much needed conversation for women who are going through it, because we do suffer in silence. There is a shame to it and an embarrassment to it that it's hard to talk about. And if people don't acknowledge your pain, don't say, look, I know this is really hard for you. And then you can say, yeah, thanks. And then it can open up the door and open up the window to more conversations. It's so critical. And I remember also when I was going through all this, there would be some people who would say, well, why don't you just adopt? Like it was the easiest thing in the world,
Right.
Just adopt a child. It is so difficult and long and bureaucratic, and you have to stay with it. Like it's a long process, and it's not easy. So I just wanted to bring awareness so that people could have a better understanding and more compassion for those of us going through it.
Now, in vitro is also, it's expensive.
Yeah.
And it's also, it's no guarantee. No
Yeah.
guarantee. And in your case, that you got lucky at one point, and then there was a pain that came with it.
Yeah, I think it's, for a portion of time, for a period of time, the government was paying for it. That was not when I was going through it, but it's difficult. You can just imagine being highly stimulated for many weeks. This is what happens because you have to stimulate your egg growth. And then there's so much hope that carries through it, and so much praying and so much wanting. And then you take a blood test and it might be like, sorry, not this time. It didn't work. We have to try again. And it's each time takes many months, and it's very, very difficult. So that the up and then the down and the up and then the down, it's emotionally, physically, and spiritually exhausting to go through in vitro. It really is. And for us, it just, it didn't work.
So I have to say that I've worked with you for over 2 decades with my job at the school board and my writing for the Suburban, and even as a city councillor in Cote-Saint-Luc. And, you were a very well-known reporter, anchor at CTV News. And I, like many other people, probably didn't know during those 7 years what you were going through. I'd like to know, I was talking to Tarah Schwartz during those 7 years. You were calling me with a smile on your face and meeting me in front of the school board for an interview. How were you able to put your game face on and wake up every day and go do your job when you were going through such hardship with miscarriages, in vitro, and then the pain of trying to get a child and trying to adopt?
It's an interesting question, Mike, and you're not alone, because like even after seeing me do a newscast, my father would call me and say, well, I'm so glad you're feeling better. I'd be like,
yeah,
thanks, Dad.
Yes.
I think it's a question of, just compartmentalizing how you're feeling. When you have a job to do, you go and you get your job done. I had a job where I had to be very, no emotions are allowed in what we do. You have to editorialize. You cannot editorialize, rather. You have to be very clear that your job is to tell people what's going on in the news and for them to make their own decisions about how they feel about it. So I left everything outside of the door when I walked into the newsroom, and I just focused on what I had to get done. It was a very difficult period, but there was no place for my personal life, as is the case for many people in their job. And I had a job to do, and I loved my job. And it was a newsroom is a wonderful place to be when you want to be distracted, because it's a very busy, demanding job. So I loved it for that, where I could just focus 100% on everything I needed to do and not have to think about what was going on in my life.
Now, one of the things you showed in the book is that while you were going through all this difficulty, you seem to have even more compassion for people when you went on certain stories who lost a child. There was something that it seemed like maybe then everyone's got compassion and sorrow for these people, but it seemed to hit you more, and it looked like the parents could see it. They could see it from you, even though you weren't telling them your story. Is that the case?
Anyone who knows me knows that I love to tell those strong human interest, super feely stories that have lots of emotion. Whenever we had newsroom stories, we'd be like, oh, that's one for Tarah. I loved doing those stories. Yeah. And so that was how I was able to bring so many of those stories into my book. Anything that sort of touched on loss or heartbreak or pain or sorrow, those were all the stories that I remembered and loved. And I felt like as I was going through my own challenges, at some point I say in the book that I never knew grief. I would be able to see it in other people. I was like, when you meet a mother who's lost her child or a father who's lost his son, I saw grief on other people's faces, but I had never truly experienced grief myself. And it was only after I experienced it myself, where I was able to look in the mirror and see the grief on my own face, that I started to relate to people a little bit differently, especially those who were going through the same kind of emotions. And I think to a certain degree, there is that reciprocity where you can see it in somebody else's eyes.
So Tarah, what advice do you give to someone who's watching our discussion right now, who's going through miscarriages? What could you tell them? You've been through it. You've been through the in vitro as well. What would you tell them?
I would tell them two things. I would say, first of all, don't give up hope, and don't judge yourself for feeling like you want to. Like, there are going to be days or weeks or months where you're going to feel like it's just too much and you just want to stop and give up and move on. And if that's truly how you feel, then 100% do that. But it's okay to feel like that and then get back up again. I fell a lot. I fell a lot down into places where I was, it was really dark, but I kept getting back up again. So it's okay to fall and keep getting back up. But if you want to become a parent, try to find every and any avenue that you can find to get there. So if adoption is something that you want to consider, put your name on a list. I say this all the time, put your name on lists. There's only a certain number of countries that are open to give back at any given time. It costs nothing to put yourself on a list. And by the time they call you, your life might have changed very drastically, and that might be not something you're interested in anymore. But just put your name on the list so that if they do call you at that moment, and you're like, oh my God, what a life-saving phone call, it will be there. So that's my first piece of advice. I always wanted to have a child and adopt a child. The having one didn't work out, and the adopted one came at exactly the perfect moment. The other piece of advice I would say is start talking about it. Try to help people who love you understand how hard it is. And whether that's telling them how you're feeling, being honest with your feelings, not being ashamed about what you're living. And I know that it's not easy, but they love you. So if you try to open that door, even give them the book, if this is my book or any documentation that helps them to understand, it will help them understand, and it will help open the door to conversation, and it will help you be more supportive, because it's a lonely place to be, Mike. It was for me, and I know it is for a lot of people. It's a really lonely road to walk. So moving forward, I would like to try to make that road less lonely. And I think by talking about it and helping people who love you understand what it is, that road will be less lonely and they'll be more supportive.
A good segue into this next question is, I don't know Enrico, your husband, never met him. I feel like I do. But it looks like you cannot do this without a partner. And to me, this read like the perfect marriage. Like if your marriage is going to be in trouble, when you're going through that for 7 years, marriages don't last unless they're strong. And obviously you had tremendous support from him.
Yeah, I think I want to say that you can do it. I'm sure any strong, if you're strong and you can get through it, if you want to do this alone, you can. Yeah. But it is definitely easier to have someone with you. And I think I've met couples now and they've emailed me, and I think there's a solidifying of a couple that happens when you go through this kind of stuff. And I think it's like you said, Mike, like it's either going to break you or it's going to make you. And if it makes you, you no longer sweat the small stuff, like when you've been through the big stuff. Right. So yeah, we have a beautiful marriage, and I have a wonderful, wonderful man who, I waited a long time for. We got into the marriage game and the baby making game late. And, that might've been one of the reasons why it was difficult, but, women are having children later. Yeah. And, most of the women who go to infertility clinics are women who are over a certain age. So it's something to consider. Yeah. So for our readers as well, and when you came to Carlisle School, your old elementary school, kids asked you about it. Why did you go to South Korea to adopt a child? And because it isn't so easy to adopt a child, and you had a false start. You had a first child. Well, you don't want to give that away, Mike. Don't give that detail away.
Okay. Well, okay, but go ahead. Why did you go to South Korea? Okay.
Same reason that coincides with the advice that I'm giving people. I put my name on every single list that was available to be put on at that time. Mm-hmm. So it included China, Thailand, South Korea, multiple different countries. Mm-hmm. And it was the very first phone call I got. And it came at a time when I really, really needed that phone call to come. So they called and they said, you're up next on the list. Is this something that you want to do? And, you know, we took a day or two to think about it. They don't give you much time.
Yeah.
And we decided it was. And that started another gigantic road down a very unexpected pathway that ended up leading to my baby.
Now, I won't give away, you know, I don't know if it was perhaps my favorite part of the book. And to me, it started like reading like a Lifetime movie. So without giving everything away, you didn't land in Korea and get on a plane the next day with a baby. This is a long process.
Yeah, I think that's what people don't understand. That's why whole idea of like, oh, why don't you just adopt a baby? Like I said, like it's just so difficult. Like you have to land in after years of paperwork, after years of, you know, waiting, you finally get there, then you have to go before a judge, and then you have to wait again for documents to be translated. And then you have to go, they tell you to go home and come back, which I didn't do. For, you know, fortunately, since we hit many other bumps in the roads, but yeah, it's a really, really long process. And that's why for me, when I finally got on that plane, leaving South Korea, it was like the most giant exhale I have ever had in my life, where I thought, wow, you know, it's over. Like this process, this whole long journey of desperately wanting to become a mother is over. Like it ended when I took off on that plane from South Korea. You know, just thinking about it, getting me all emotional. But yeah, but
you know, Tarah, when you know, one of the things I'll tell readers who get this book, and they all should read this book, we're going to make sure there's a copy available at the Cote-saint-Luc Public Library, maybe more than one copy. But I got teary-eyed myself when I started reading the epilogue, and I felt like I had readers went through this journey with you from beginning to end, and to see how happy you were. And now, you know, you have a beautiful 10-year-old son who goes to the English Montreal School Board, Bancroft Elementary School. I remember Tarah, you calling me when he was a baby and say, Mike, I know I'm calling you Mr., but I got to talk to you about schools for my son. And I was so happy that you chose the EMSB. So tell us about Sam.
Oh my goodness, Sam. He is, he's kind and funny and cuddly and smart and very grounded in who he is. He knows exactly who he is. He knows exactly what his story is. He knows how unique and beautiful his story is. And I think he's going to be a wonderful voice for anyone who might be themselves moving forward if they were adopted child. I think we all suffer from our things. You know, part of this book for me was giving people a place to see themselves reflected, you know, that my voice is one voice. This is one book, one story of so many women and men and couples that are going through that. And that's why it was important for me to be able to put something out there, to have a voice, to see themselves reflected. I think it's so important. And I'm hoping that it will spark, you know, more conversations about this, so that we can change things moving forward for women and couples going through this.
Okay, so my final question is, as a mom, you decided to leave the news business, which doesn't have regular hours. You went to work in public relations at a firm, and then you ended up getting a very exciting job at the MUHC as head of marketing communications for the foundation. And it's great. We hear you on CJD every Sunday on the radio show for the MUHC Foundation. So you still dabble in your former media. So was that a decision made as a mom?
Yeah, it definitely was. I think anyone who has kids knows the transition from daycare into grade 1 is so enormous. And I had really difficult hours, you know, news anchors work at night, started at, you know, 2:30, finished at 12:30 in the morning. I was missing bedtime and dinner. And I had done the job for a really long time. You know, I had done it for a really long time. And I thought, you know what, I have to change now, because he can't change. He's going to school now. This is his schedule. So I thought, you know what, maybe this is the perfect moment to try something new. You know, I had been doing it a couple of decades, so I felt it was the right moment. And, you know, my colleagues were extremely supportive, and I loved what I did, but I love what I do now. So I've had the opportunity to do many, many wonderful things. So he was definitely the reason. I don't know if I would have still been there had he not been here. I don't know, but it was change for the good.
Well, it's a terrific book. People can get it at the local bookstores, on Amazon, and very soon at the Cote-saint-Luc Public Library. So Tarah, thank you very much and congratulations.
Thank you so much, Mike.
Tarah Schwartz has been my guest.